Hey guys, I'm doing another video today and look at this paradigm shift topic that I introduced a few weeks ago where the Bible says that Jerusalem's in the center of the world. But now if you look at the maps, and we're going to go through this briefly again as an introduction of those who hadn't seen the previous video on this, because this video is going to go a little bit more in depth. I'm going to introduce some new ideas about this. But the first video, Mystery Babylon, is it New York, is it Paris, is it London, or is it all three? I introduced this concept of Jerusalem once being the center of the world, and it was. That's what the Bible says. So in biblical times, Jerusalem was in the center of the earth. As it says in Ezekiel 5:5, and it says in other places in the Bible, "Thus said the Lord God, this is Jerusalem. I've set it in the middle of the nations and countries that are round about her." And there are many maps from antiquity that shows Jerusalem being in the center of our known realm. But in today's map, it absolutely is not in the center of the world. You can see here on a globe map that has been placed onto a flat surface that Jerusalem is not near the center of the world. And even on a flat earth map, you can see this map where it is mocking the Ezekiel 5:5 verse, which says that I have set in the center of the nations with countries all around her about Jerusalem. But has the earth always looked like it does today? And that got me into looking at the Continental Drift Theory proposed by Alfred Wegener, a German scientist here in the early 20th century. And this history proposed by him is that one time, billions and millions of years ago, there was a supercontinent known as Pangaea. And that over natural processes with plate tectonics, that these plates of the earth slowly move and separate. And after millions and millions of years, the supercontinent of Pangaea became the continents that we know today. And part of his evidence of the Continental Drift Theory is the puzzle pieces putting together, and we talked about that on the previous video, that if you look at the continents, you can put them together like a jigsaw puzzle. And it works on any map you want to use. This is a flat earth map, but if you rotate the Americas counterclockwise and Africa and Europe clockwise, they will fit together perfectly like a jigsaw puzzle. He also proposed that there's a lot of evidence through fossils, through landforms, especially rock strata. For instance, the support with mountain ranges of the same rocks across continents. And you can see here the Caledonian Front, for instance. If you put this together, it would fit together like a belt. The Appalachian Mountains in the eastern U.S. and the Caledonian Mountains in the British Isles, they're made of the same rocks and mineral contents. This is a lot of good evidence of his theory. But how did it really happen? Did it occur over millions and millions and millions of years of plate tectonics slowly drifting apart? Or was it something more sudden, something more recent? And I proposed that it was on the last video. How did this happen? I proposed that it occurred after the second coming of Jesus Christ, that the trumpet and vial judgment, specifically the seventh vial judgment, caused this super megaquake earthquake that divided Pangaea, the supercontinent, into the continents that we know today. And in Revelation 16:17 through 19, the seventh angel poured out his bowl into the air. There was flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunders, a great earthquake, such as there had never been since man was on the earth. So great was that earthquake. The great city was split into three parts. This is Jerusalem, and the cities of the nation fell. This was a super megaquake, unlike anything ever experienced in the past until that time, and has not been experienced since. And this is an earthquake of epic proportions that was prophesied in the Bible as this judgment at the time of soon after Jesus' second coming. And we see this throughout the Bible of this earthquake being prophesied of in Haggai. And I'm just going to go through several verses within the Bible because this event is so important to our history and to fulfilling biblical prophecy. But Haggai 2:6 says, "For thus saith the Lord of hosts, yet once it is a little while, and I will shake the heavens and the earth and the sea and the dry land, and I will shake all nations, and the desire of all nations shall come, and I will fill this house with glory, saith the Lord of hosts." In Ezekiel 38:19 through 23. And I'll just read verses 19 and 20. "For in my jealousy and in the fire of my wrath I have spoken. Surely in that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel, so that the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, the beasts of the field, all creeping things that creep on the earth, and all men who are on the face of the earth shall shake at my presence. The mountains shall be thrown down, the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground." In Nahum 1:5, "The mountains quake at him, and the hills melt, and the earth is burned at his presence, yea, the world and all that dwell therein." This is talking about this cataclysmic judgment of the seventh trumpet and seventh vial in the book of Revelation. Psalm 18:7, "Then the earth shook and trembled, the foundations also of the hills moved and were shaken because he was wroth." In Psalm 46:6, "The heathen raged, the kingdoms were moved. He uttered his voice, the earth melted." In Psalms 46:1 through 3, "God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof, Selah." In Isaiah 2:19, and Isaiah prophesies a lot about this cataclysmic judgment of this super earthquake. In Isaiah 2:19, "And they shall go into the holes of the rocks and into the caves of the earth for fear of the Lord and for the glory of his majesty, when he arises to shake terribly the earth." In Isaiah 13:13, "Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall remove out of her place in the wrath of the Lord of hosts, and in the day of his fierce anger." So here, the earth is removing out of her place. In Isaiah 24:18 through 20, "And it shall come to pass that he who fleeth from the noise of the fear shall fall into the pit, and he that cometh up out of the midst of the pit shall be taken in the snare. For the windows from on high are open, and the foundations of the earth do shake. The earth is utterly broken down, the earth is clean dissolved, the earth is moved exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard, and shall be removed like a cottage, and the transgression thereof shall be heavy upon it, and it shall fall and not rise again." This is all prophecy of this cataclysmic megaquake that occurred at the time of the seventh trumpet, and specifically the seventh vial judgment after the second coming of Jesus Christ. So is there evidence of this in our past? And again, this study has been looking for months and months, almost a year now, answering the questions: has the second coming of Jesus Christ already occurred? Has the millennial kingdom of Christ, the millennial reign of Christ, this 1,000 years prophesied in the book of Revelation in chapter 20, has it already come to fruition? And I think we can undoubtedly, through the study, answer yes to both questions. But this is further evidence of the second coming of Jesus Christ and the judgments within the book of Revelation prior to the millennial kingdom being in our past. God sends the global and final quake. And Jesus speaks about this in the Olivet Discourse, just reading in Mark 13, verse 8, "For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be earthquakes in divers places, and there shall be famines and troubles. These are the beginnings of sorrows." So when we get to the book of Revelation, we see a pattern of earthquakes developing beginning at the sixth seal in Revelation 6:12. And this, I believe, is the second coming of Jesus Christ in the sixth seal. But it reads in Revelation 6:12, "And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." This is the first time that we see an earthquake in the book of Revelation being described. The second time we see it is prior to the first trumpet judgment, after the sixth and seventh seal are opened, before the trumpet and vial judgments. It reads in Revelation 8:5, "And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire of the altar and cast it into the earth, and there were voices and thunderings and lightnings and an earthquake." Then, at the sixth trumpet, the second of three woes, in Revelation 11:13, it reads, "In the same hour was there a great earthquake, and the 10th part of the city fell. And in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000, and the remnant were affrighted, and gave glory to the God of heaven. The second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly." So in quick succession, the sixth trumpet ends, and the beginning of the seventh trumpet sounds, and with that becomes a rapid fire of the vial judgments, culminating in the seventh vial judgment. In Revelation 11:15, "And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever." The seventh trumpet sounds. And with that seventh trumpet, we see in Revelation 11:19, "And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and great hail." Now we get more specifics about this verse when we go to read about the last vial judgment in Revelation 16, the seventh vial, the final vial judgment. And it reads in Revelation 16:17, "And the seventh angel poured out his vial into the air, and there came a great voice out of the temple of heaven from the throne, saying, It is done. And there were voices and thunders and lightning, and there was a great earthquake, such as was not since men were upon the earth, so mighty an earthquake and so great. And the great city was divided into three parts." This is Jerusalem that's speaking of the great city. "And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came in remembrance before God, to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath." Mystery Babylon, Jerusalem, Roman Empire, as this combination, this harlot and this beast system combined, forming Mystery Babylon, was judged. And it fell. Destruction of Jerusalem, the fall of Rome, and the nations around it fell with it at this cataclysmic judgment. As we continue reading in Revelation 16:20, "And every island fled away, and the mountains were not found. And there fell upon men a great hail out of heaven, every stone about the weight of a talent, and men blasphemed God because of the plague of the hail, for the plague thereof was exceeding great." So all of these prophecies of this specific time, this specific judgment that was upcoming. In the book of Revelation, John describes this soon imminent event that was to occur within that generation at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And after this seventh vial judgment, and the city of Jerusalem was split into three parts in the greatest megaquake ever recorded, experienced in human history, where the earth moved exceedingly like plate tectonics. It literally divided. And my thoughts were that at one point, when we read the Bible in biblical times, and all of the lands and the cities and the seas and the rivers, that what they tell us now isn't how it looked in biblical times. It was a different landscape at that time, because it was a supercontinent. And I want to show you a little more thoughts on what I think it looked like coming up. But afterwards, this is the new heavens and new earth that Isaiah was describing, that Peter was describing in 2 Peter 3. The new heavens and the new earth were that the heaven and earth that was created in Genesis 1:1, this was a new heavens and new earth that was being established, where the continents, which were all together at one time, were now being separated and were divided by large areas of oceans. But I think this is similar to what the supercontinent looked like in biblical times. So when we're reading the Bible, we can't look at our current maps to see where all the cities and all the countries and all the seas and rivers were. We have to think that there was a cataclysmic event prior to that, and that the topography during biblical times was much different. And look at this relationship of the continents with a central sea in the middle. And this is what scientists now are projecting, that after several more millions and millions and millions of years of plate tectonics, that this is what our Earth will look like in another 250 million years, that it will get back together and form this. And they call this Proxima, or Pangaea Proxima, or Pangaea Ultima. But this is a proposed future supercontinent yet to come. Again, the lies and deception during this era that we're in this little season, it will show you the truth in plain sight, but it will add lies within the truths to get everyone confused. I think what they're showing as being a possibility 250 million years from now has already occurred in our past, and this is more what I think the supercontinent will look like, again, with a central sea, the circular sea. And keep that in mind as we go forward, looking at new ideas on this paradigm shift concept. But now we see the continents of today look like this. And again, I just want you to look at how Africa, South America fit together. I want you to specifically see how Europe can come into this area, and how even Spain and France can fit like a glove into the Gulf of Mexico, into the eastern border of Mexico. How the Scandinavian countries, if these landmasses were closer together, could fit perfectly within the Hudson River. And how if this Europe and Africa opened up to fit in here, how all of it would fit perfectly together. Keep all of that in mind as we go forward. But the new heavens and new earth, again, let's read what Peter says on this new heavens and new earth that were created at the time of this cataclysmic judgment, with this great earthquake, with the earth melting, literally melting because of the fire and heat of the judgment. In 2 Peter 3:10, it says, "But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in the which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hastening unto the coming of the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for new heavens and a new earth wherein dwelleth righteousness." This is Peter speaking to his generation of imminent events that were to come upon his generation that they would actually see. In Isaiah 65:17, Isaiah speaks of this same time period of this new heavens and new earth being created at this time. It reads, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind." All the works of that generation were destroyed. The destruction of Jerusalem, the Roman Empire, it was completely destroyed. Any evidence of who the Antichrist was, who the beast was, who the false prophet was, the image of the beast, where is it, what was it? This was completely destroyed, and the former shall not be remembered nor come into mind at the time when the new heavens and new earth is created. We'll still speculate about that, trying to figure out who these people were, these real people that were prophesied of by John in the book of Revelation. But again, historical records are going to be completely destroyed and wiped out when you understand just how big a cataclysmic judgment and event this was, where everything literally melted. In Isaiah 66:22, for as the new heavens and the new earth which I will make shall remain before me, saith the Lord, so shall your seed and your name remain. And that seed is Christ. As a believer, that is the seed that was carried through that cataclysmic judgment of that time into the period of the new heavens and new earth when the millennial kingdom was established. The new heavens and new earth. And this, again, is what Isaiah was talking about, what Peter was talking about in 2 Peter, of what was created at the time of this destruction, this splitting of this supercontinent Pangaea. And I think it had a central sea in it, and we're going to look at that. But do not get confused. The new heavens and new earth that Peter and Isaiah are speaking of with Revelation 21, which is the new heaven and new earth. This is a completely different thing that's still yet to come in our future. This new heaven and new earth. This is after the heavens and earth flee away at the time of the great white throne judgment. This is still in our future. But this was our past before the second coming of Jesus Christ. A landmass, I think the supercontinent with a central sea with subsequent seas coming out around it, with a western ocean and an eastern ocean. And we see descriptions of that in the Bible, of the Great Sea, that where the sun sets in the west, and the East Sea is also the utmost sea and the hinder sea. But again, this I think is more accurate when we're reading the Bible in biblical times, looking at the land, the mountain ranges, the seas, the oceans, the rivers, the cities, the countries. This I think is a more accurate map, and that this is the starting place where we should be looking at when we're studying the cities and where they are and how they relate to each other, that we should be thinking about this landmass in these terms for biblical times. You can see it says right here, this is Pangaea Proxima, and this is the Earth 250 million years from now. Again, our smart scientists said this is what it's going to look like in our future, but I think this is probably more what it looks like in our past. And that this Pangaea, again, Edward Wegener's theory, that over millions and millions of years, you can see from 225 million years to 150 to 100 to the Earth today, that natural processes through plate tectonics slowly cause these land masses to drift apart to where our continents are today. But no, it didn't happen over millions of years. It was a sudden catastrophic event that occurred at the seventh vial. And we read about it in the book of Revelation. It didn't happen too long ago. So now let's get to looking at what we're given in our church about the biblical lands, and let's think about this with this new perspective in mind. So here you can see a picture of Israel with the Great Sea to the west, and they put in parentheses the Mediterranean Sea, but it never says in the Bible the Mediterranean Sea. We just assume that the Great Sea is the Mediterranean Sea. We also see the Sea of Galilee right here with the Jordan River running through it. And we can see today, this is what we're given as what biblical times Sea of Galilee and Jordan River were. And this is what it looks like today. Here's the Jordan River emptying into the Sea of Galilee. You can see one side of the coast of the Sea of Galilee here and another right on the other side. The Sea of Galilee is not big at all. Neither is the Jordan River. And you can see the Jordan River here. You can see its width, and it gets a little more narrow. It may get a little wider, but the general width of the Jordan River is not big at all. But this is what we're given in our church today, is what it is. And there's a lot of people that go to Israel on Holy Land trips and get water out of this river thinking it's the river that John the Baptist baptized Jesus in. And we read in Joshua 3, Joshua 4, where the children of Israel crossed the Jordan River, and God does this miraculous thing of parting the Jordan River so that they could pass with the Ark of the Covenant led by Joshua into the Promised Land across the Jordan River to Jericho, and that this was this supernatural, miraculous feat. And you can see here a pictorial that you may see in church of the children of Israel, the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant, and as long as they stood in the Jordan River, that it would be dry on either side, and there would be a dry path for the children of Israel to cross into the Promised Land. But then you look at the Jordan River, and you're like, that's not really that big a deal, to tell you the truth. You know, you could literally get across that without needing any miraculous help. But you read about this in the Bible. Like Joshua 5:1, it reads, "And it came to pass when all the kings of the Amorites, which were on the side of Jordan westward, and all the kings of the Canaanites, which were by the sea, heard that the Lord had dried up the waters of Jordan from before the children of Israel until we were passed over, that their heart melted, neither was their spirit in them anymore because of the children of Israel." This was a supernatural, miraculous feat, just as much as it was when the Red Sea was parted, when Moses led the children of Israel out of Egypt. And so you read that, and then they tell you today, this is the Jordan River, and it doesn't make sense. This, I think, is more what the Jordan River probably looked like, and this is a picture of the Mississippi River in New Orleans, off the banks of New Orleans. But I think the Jordan River was extremely large, a major, major river coming from the Sea of Galilee. This was a supernatural feat to get from one side of this river to the other, something that they couldn't just hop across or wade through or build a small bridge or dam up part of the river themselves and walk across. Something of this magnitude needed supernatural help. It needed God's help. And that's why the kings of the Canaanites were so fearful of the children of Israel, because they saw the power of God through this supernatural event. Another part of the Bible, we read about Jesus calming the storm when him and his disciples are in a ship going across the Sea of Galilee. And it reads in Mark 4:37 through 39, "And there arose a great storm of wind," and this is when they're on the Sea of Galilee, "and the waves beat into the ship, so that it was now full. And he was in the hinder part of the ship," speaking of Jesus, "asleep on a pillow. And they awake him, and say unto him, Master, carest thou not that we perish? And he arose and rebuked the wind, and said unto the sea, Peace, be still. And the wind ceased, and there was a great calm." So when I read that in the book of Mark, this is what I'm picturing. I'm picturing this huge storm at sea, these violent waves coming across the bow of the ship, where literally the disciples thought they were going to die in this storm. Something like this. But then you look at the Sea of Galilee, and it's a small little lake. It's also known as Lake Kinneret. Lake Kinneret. And it's a freshwater lake. There's no waves that get this big. There never has on this body of water. Here's another picture. You can see the coast on either side. There's not a violent storm that's going to cause men in a ship to fear for their lives because of the waves. And here's another picture. Again, this is a freshwater lake, and it's very small, and you can see all sides of the coast at all times here. But this is what they pass off in our churches when you visit the Holy Land, as this is the Sea of Galilee that is spoken of in the Bible. The Sea of Galilee, that Jesus walks on water, that he calmed the storm. All these events that you see are on this tiny little freshwater lake. That's not true. So let's look at what the word Galilee means. And if you look up Galilee, the Hebrew meaning of it means circular, or a district, an area, also known as a district of nations, or a revolving area. Again, something in circuit or circular. That's what Galilee means. It's also known as the Sea of Tiberias. It says in John 6:1, after these things, Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And Tiberias, you see here in Hebrew, actually means the navel, or the center. The center, Galilee meaning circular or revolving, a district, a circular district of nations upon a sea. That's what the name means. I believe that the Sea of Galilee was a freshwater sea where the Jordan River supplied and came from, and then distributed out into the salt sea, into the ocean, the Western Sea, the Eastern Sea. But I think the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias, in biblical times, was this centrally located freshwater sea, a very large body of water, larger than the Mediterranean Sea that we see today, that could take upon a heavy violent storm because of the area of it. And again, the Jordan River, I think, this description, this pictorial doesn't show that, because that wasn't the picture's point of this, but I use it as an example of the circular central sea around where a supercontinent and a land masses form around. And I think Jerusalem was probably somewhere right in the center, just like the Bible says. And it could be even where Paul's journeys, when he goes to Rome and to different areas, to the islands, that he's actually going in the central area here. Again, it never says that Paul goes along the Mediterranean Sea. That's just what we assume. But I think it was something much different. These land masses, the supercontinent with a central sea, the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias, the navel within the supercontinent, with the Jordan River, very important river that also had a lot of supernatural occurrences within it, was this central river that drained into the Salt Sea. They will say that that's the Dead Sea, but I think it's a much bigger sea that it's talking about in biblical times. So now let's go back to the earthquake that shook Jerusalem and split it into 3 parts. And on the previous video, again, we talk about the possible cities that of our modern day, what those cities might have once been. And I proposed in the previous video that that New England and Europe and the northern coast of Africa were all together at one point, and that Jerusalem being broken up into 3 cities, possibly those 3 parts are super cities today known as New York, London, or Paris. That those could be a third of the previous super city in the midst of the nations, Jerusalem. And that this earthquake originated in the central aspect of this supercontinent at the time of these cataclysmic judgments in Revelation 7, or in the book of Revelation at the seventh trumpet and seventh vial judgment. But Jerusalem and the surrounding area was the epicenter of the greatest earthquake of all time that caused this, quote, continental drift. And you can see here the epicenter is the point directly above the focus of an earthquake on the Earth's surface. And with earthquakes come aftershocks. We see, and we've already read in the book of Revelation, that there were several earthquakes progressing to this megaquake that occurred at the seventh vial judgment. But after this, I think there continue to be earthquakes and aftershocks of this cataclysmic event, and I think we may even still be experiencing today. For instance, if we look at old maps, we see California as an island, and we see this all the way up until close to the 1800s, if not into the 1800s. You can see again California being an island. Now, obviously, it's not. It's connected to the continental United States. So what happened? Well, with that thought, also looking at patterns of earthquakes and how they have progressed over time. If we see records hundreds, centuries and centuries and centuries ago, there were a lot of earthquakes in eastern United States and in the Midwest. But now, most of the earthquakes that we see are on the west coast of the Americas, of the United States, of South America, and on the eastern coast of Asia, where Japan is, where China is, Indonesia, all the way here. So you can see the pattern of earthquakes currently is at the borders of the land masses. And so I think what we have experienced during our generations and previous generations for the past few centuries are aftershocks of the central earthquake when the seventh vial judgment destroyed the supercontinent, broke it into pieces, and then over the last several hundreds of years, we have experienced aftershocks of this megaquake, beginning centrally close to it, but now as time has progressed, it's getting further and further away. And I think that this may also be a hint that we are now close to the end of this era of deception that we're in, because this aftershock of this central earthquake that we see in the book of Revelation has now run its course and is on the outer skirts of the continents that we know today that were broken up at that time. So now, the new world and the old world. Again, this is the new world. This is the new heavens and new earth that were established after the judgments that we read about in the book of Revelation. And again, look at how everything fits together, and look especially how this fits together with Spain, France, Europe, Western Europe, into here. And I think that that is why we see what we do today. And let me explain as far as the culture of the Americas. We're told that a few hundred years ago, we had people like Christopher Columbus and other explorers in this age of discovery going to find the new world. Now, I think it's obviously a new world because things were split up, and I think people in Europe were going to explore what was once closer to them. So the explorers of the new world, and again, look at this area here, and we hear about this as kids. You know, if you're indoctrinated by something as a kid, you know there's probably a reason why. And we all learn about Christopher Columbus at a young age, this famous explorer who found America and his different voyages. And we see here the different voyages from Spain, Western Europe, Northern Africa, Portugal, into the Caribbean, into the Americas. But they tell you that people came from this area after Christopher Columbus and others explored this area, and then the Spanish came over and settled this. Then the French came over and settled this area. Then the English came and settled this area. But I think these people, when they got here, were already there, and they were Spanish, and they were French, and they were English, because they were part of the culture that was once close, part of the supercontinent that was broken up at the time of the seventh Vial Judgement. And now, several generations later, after that cataclysmic event, those same cultures that were once here simply continued in these areas here. So again, look at Spain and France and how it's shaped. And look at the Gulf of Mexico and how it's shaped. And then think about Spain being right in here and Spanish-speaking people in this area. Think of France in our previous map being right here, with Spain down in here in Portugal. France fits right here. And where is French culture? It's in Louisiana, going all the way through the Midwest if you look into Canada. But I think that the people here were part of the generations that lived through the cataclysmic events and simply continued their French culture, simply continued their Spanish culture. They weren't immigrants that settled after Christopher Columbus and other discoverers and sailors came across and found the New World. They were already there. And again, this is our current map, and this is what I proposed, that all this did fit together, but it wasn't a millions and millions of years process of plate tectonics. It was a cataclysmic event, much more recent, much more sudden. And how it all fits together. You can see again how Western Europe fits into the Gulf of Mexico. That can explain the Spanish culture here. It can explain the Portuguese culture in Brazil, the French culture in Louisiana, in New Orleans area. Again, it's called New Spain because it was a New Spain. It used to be attached to Spain and broke apart. The same thing with France. Again, if you look and put that Western Europe into the Gulf of Mexico, France is right here. It literally lines up right there. But they say, and they call it New France. But again, our history books tell you half-truths. And they say this area was colonized by the French in America and Quebec and the Acadia and Louisiana. These were the Acadians. And it stretched all the way here. But this culture was previously attached to a central supercontinent. And they continued, those that lived through it, and then reproduced in the new heavens and new earth during the millennial reign, that they simply kept their culture. But again, I mean, we could go so much further, and we'll close for now. But I mean, this could explain the Aztec, the Mayan, the Inca cultures, that, you know, these cultures that we see in Central America and South America that were suddenly, you know, centuries and centuries ago just wiped out through catastrophic earthquakes and famines and plagues. Again, I think it was wiped out. These were heathen nations that we may even read about in the Bible when we view our Bible reading from the context of this supercontinent and Central America being right there together with Africa, with Western Europe, with the Americas. I think that the Aztec, the Incas that were wiped out, I think they were probably wiped out with famine and plague and catastrophic events, but it occurred after the second coming of Jesus Christ during the time of the trumpet and vial judgment seen in the book of Revelation. But this explains it a lot better than our history books do, in my opinion. So a lot to, digest with this. Again, this is a paradigm shift topic, but I think there's a lot of validity to it. I just read the book of Acts looking at Paul's journeys and how things relate, from cities. And I want to continue to do that going into the new year with a new Bible reading it through the Old Testament, looking at these relationships, trying to tie in this theory of prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ and the trumpet and vial judgments, that the earth was literally, like it says in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and it was one earth. I think it had a central sea. I think that sea was the Sea of Galilee, the Sea of Tiberias, and I think it had Eastern and Western Ocean, just like we read in the Bible. But again, this study is bringing together biblical prophecy. It's bringing together our historical past. Just looking at it through this lens, I never would have thought to look at the theory that Wegener, the German scientist, proposed in the 20th century of the continental drift from this perspective. But this study brings a lot of our historical past together. We see some truths and some good evidence of the continental drift theory, but we know it didn't occur over 250 million years. That's the lies that we see in the era of deception. There is truth to it, but there's lies mixed in, just like it is with all of our historical past. As far as I'm concerned, is either misrepresented, conflated, or right out made up. But this ties it all together. And again, this end times perspective of the little season connects the dots to biblical prophecy, to our historical past. With these being further examples, this gives more evidence of Jesus' second coming being in our past, that the millennial kingdom's already occurred, and that these ideas, that theories that these scientists, these smart scientists give, of the continental drift theory, these evolutionary processes that they say take millions of years. Well, we know now that just by reading through a biblical lens how it could have taken place. And again, this is putting the pieces together of all this better than any other eschatology that I've ever studied or been taught. So we'll continue to do it. God willing, we'll continue to look at this further, deeper. Maybe with this video, others can begin to think about the biblical lens, and when reading the Bible, can start to put some of these puzzle pieces together from this perspective. Because, again, everything is still in its infancy. We're all still learning. Let's all be patient with each other as we live and love in Satan's little season. God bless.